Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Padavajikacharya, Ashtotar, that Shri Srimad of Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajikacharya, Ashtotar, that Shri Srimad of Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, I'm pretty sure on text 30. Right? Where's our friend Govardhan? Are you sure?
Actually, 31.
31. Okay. All right. I surrender. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 10th day of August 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer in Consciousness. Text number 31 at the bottom of page 561. Yada bhuta pathag bhavam ekastham anupashyati tata eva chavistaram brahma sampadhyate tada. Yada bhuta pathag bhavam ekastham anupashyati tata eva chavistaram brahma sampadhyate tada. Yada bhuta pathag bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada yada bhuta pathak bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada yada bhuta pathak bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada yada bhuta pathak bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada yada bhuta pathak bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada yada bhuta pathak bhavam ekastamanu tata eva cha vistaram Brahma sampadhyate tada. No? Not yet? Hina? Not yet? Okay. Okay. Yada, when, bhuta, of living entities, pritag bhavam, separated identities, ekastam, situated in one, anupashyati, one tries to see through authority, tata eva, thereafter, cha also, vistaram, the expansion, Brahma, the absolute, sampadhyate, he attains tada at that time. When a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies, and he sees how beings are expanded everywhere, he attains the Brahman conception. Purport. When one can see that the various bodies of living entities arise due to the different desires of the individual soul, and do not actually belong to the soul itself, one actually sees. In the material conception of life, we find someone a demigod, someone a human being, a dog, a cat, etc. This is material vision, not actual vision. This material differentiation is due to a material conception of life. After the destruction of the material body, the spirit soul is one. The spirit soul, due to contact with material nature, gets different types of bodies. When one can see this, he attains spiritual vision. Thus, being freed from differentiations like man, animal, big, low, etc., one becomes purified in his consciousness and able to develop Krishna consciousness in his spiritual identity. How he then sees things will be explained in the next verse. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So Krishna is continuing to speak about the process of the purification of vision, of seeing differently. And as I've often mentioned, the state of consciousness you have, your mentality, is what determines what you see. A dog may wander in here. We actually had some, I think it was before any of you were here, we had some birds flying around in here at one point. They got in through the door, and we used to have a lot more birds. Climate change has changed things. The insect apocalypse. Anyway, I won't get into that. But they got in here, and he's just flying around, you know. So, well, how are we going to get him out? It was a while before we could shoo him out the door. And so, I didn't think of it at the time, but welcome, Nandini, Radhika. Nice to see you. Satyajulal, Haribol. And so, what could the bird see? You know, he's got eyes, physical eyes, we have eyes, but has completely different mentality. He was flying around. I just described how years ago a bird got in here. And he was flying here and there, we were trying to shoo him out. And I was just thinking, what is he seeing? He's not seeing a picture of the Rasa dance. He's not seeing... The deities were closed, of course. Their curtains were closed. But it's according to the consciousness, one sees things differently. Now, there's a beautiful verse in the Brahma Samhita, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, describing how the devotee whose eyes are tinged with the salve of prema always sees Krishna within the heart. And we can expand on that and say that actually sees Krishna in everyone's heart. That's what this verse is all about. Seeing the super soul. Super soul is not different from Krishna. But our material vision is covered according to our mentality. And even among human beings, we see things so many different ways. So by the purification of the senses, Krishna reveals himself more and more. There's a famous verse, you may be familiar with it, Atakshi Krishna Namadi. Maybe not. This is a verse that Prabhupada would often quote. It's quoted in one purport, at least one purport in the Bhagavad Gita. Atakshi Krishna Namadi nabave grayam indriyai sevan mukhehi jivado swayam eva spuratyadaha. Very important verse. Sri Krishna Namadi. So Adi means etc. oftentimes. Sri Krishna's transcendental name, form, qualities, pastimes. Nabhaved grayam indriyai. Now this word grayam is equivalent, and it almost sounds the same, to the word grasp in English. Grasp in the sense of understand. You see? You use it that way, right? I can't grasp what you're saying. So grayam indriyai, with our present senses, we can't understand the true nature of Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. People may come into the temple for the first time, checking it out. And was it yesterday? Who was talking about mudras? Was it Rajendranath Prabhu? Anyway, or Dharma Setu, I think, was talking about. So mudras, how this wonderful mudra, it has a name, Radharani's mudra. Oftentimes we have Abhayadan mudra, the gift of fearlessness. That's what this mudra is all about. Now, here's also a mudra. It's not a Vaishnava mudra, but someone may stand in the back on the Sunday feast, checking things out. Means I'm not going to let things in. I got my defenses up, right? Checking it out. It's not like this. This means I'm into it. This is another mudra. So these expressions, they reveal one's emotions, one's consciousness. And we know it all the time, that you express yourself with your hands and with your facial expressions, so many things. So, with our present senses, we cannot understand the significance of Krishna's form, his qualities, all those different things. They oftentimes seem like mythology. That's probably called a mythology, In other words, it's too far out. It's too far beyond our present experience. And what we think we understand and know, it doesn't compute. So we put it in a box of Indian or Hindu mythology or something like that. But by the process of bhakti yoga, we purify the senses, beginning with the tongue. This verse says, but if you serve Krishna, beginning with the tongue, sevam mukhehi jihvado, the jiva, J-I-H-V-A, means it's jiva, different word than a jiva. Every letter counts. Beginning with the tongue by chanting the holy name and tasting prasad. Then, if you follow that process of purification, swayam eva spuratyada, the Lord himself will gradually reveal himself to you. This is a very important point. We cannot, by our own endeavor, by the ascending process, gathering evidence and coming to hypothesis and all these things, figure out the transcendence. It lies beyond the realm of our senses and mind. There's a wonderful name for Krishna. It appears in this verse right near the beginning of Bhagavatam. Savai pang sang paro dharma yato bhaktir adhokshaje. Adhokshaje is the name for Krishna. And this verse says that the supreme dharma is that which engenders, develops bhakti for adhokshaja. And Prabhupada, in one lecture in this verse, he explains that word. It has three elements, Ada, Aksha, and Ja. So Ja is almost always means short for Janma, birth, generating. And Aksha means the eyes, or it stands in for all the senses. So the knowledge that's generated by our senses, our material senses and mind, is pushed down by Krishna. In other words, he's transcendental to it. It's the very definition of transcendence. Transcendental, beyond the range of our material senses and mind. So, how are we going to perceive him? How we can't understand anything about him unless he reaches out to us and makes himself accessible. And that's what the avatar is all about. Avatar means descent from above. So our books are filled with description of different avatars, especially Bhagavatam. We learn about Varaha, we learn about Lord Nrsingadev, Matsya, so many avatars. But of all of them, Krishna is the source. He's the fountainhead of all the avatars. That's mentioned in its famous verse. Ete changsakala pungsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. In the 3rd chapter, I believe, 28th verse. This line, this little half verse, is said to be the Paribhas Sutra, the basis of the whole Bhagavatam. Meaning that it's the foundational truth upon which everything else rests. And what is that simple truth? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the source of all avatars, he's the source of all energies, everything that we see. What the Vedanta Sutra says we should search for, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, be inquisitive about Brahman, and then the next sutra defines what it is. Janma Yasya Yataha, that from which everything is generated. Again, we have this word Janma. And Adi, and who sustains everything and eventually destroys everything, that's the Supreme Brahman. And Bhagavatam, which is the natural commentary, says yes, and it's that source of everything and all energies. It's a supreme person, and it's Krishna. And this whole book, the final Purana, final work of literature of Vedavyas, is going to deal with that subject matter and that subject matter only. Now it's interesting because now we're in a part of the 5th canto where Agnidra is being seduced by Purvachitti, and one may say, well, what does that have to do with Krishna? Well, if you read in context and you see, actually it's leading up to the appearance of Bharat and the appearance of Rishabdev, he talks about pure devotion. It all comes back. It all comes back to pure devotional service. The Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, back to our verse. We just read, when a sensible man sees the different identities to the different material bodies. Now this has been stressed throughout the Bhagavad Gita. The famous verse in the 5th chapter, Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gabihastini shunichayava sapakecha pandita samadarshanaha. You've heard this one before. Rings a bell. Okay. We have to learn these verses. So this is a verse exactly echoing what we see here. A pundit, a learned person, someone who's learned in Krishna consciousness, who sees these different personalities, he sees the oneness. Samadarshana means seeing the equality of them, which is that they're all spirit souls. They're all conscious beings with the super soul inside the heart. So who are the Vidya Vinaya Sampane? A learned and humble Brahman. Brahman Gavi is a cow. I think it's Gavi the cow. Gavi Hastini and is an elephant. And a dog eater. They're all listed here, from the the top Brahman down to the lowest. He sees the oneness in them. He sees the soul present in each. And that's why you can see how your mentality changes. I mean, I take my walk. Before class, I take my walk and a cool down period. So now it's light. I don't have to take my flashlight. But when it's during the fall and winter, then I take a flashlight because I try to avoid stepping on any bugs. You want to avoid that, right? They're living entities also. But who else is worrying about that? Everyone's just walking, right? And that's you have to pay for that. Everything counts, even unknowingly. There's a gata sukriti and a gata duskriti also, meaning unknowingly you perform some service for Krishna. That's very good, but unknowingly you commit so many sins, and you have to pay for those. Unless you have a process to clear those sinful reactions out, and that's what Krishna consciousness is. it's inevitable. You light the fire to cook something, and some bug in there, is immolated. Can't avoid it. So we need the process of devotional service that constantly, the chanting of the holy name, it's being taken care of. That's a very important point. So here, he's saying that one who ceases to see all these differentiations. Now, last night, you remember I talked about the delusion of duality? The end of the 7th chapter is this verse: Itcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutari sammohang sargayanti parantapa. That our imprisonment, if you will, in this material encagement of this universe and the material bodies and everything, begins with our desire to compete with Krishna and our aversion to serving him. Itcha means desire. So we're in the spiritual world and we desire to compete with Krishna, and proportionately we don't want to serve him. And that gives rise to our absorption in material things, which is filled with duality. Meaning, oh, this is pleasurable, this is painful. This is hot, this is cold. You see? But actually, it's all simply the play of the modes of nature. There's a oneness to it all. And when you can see that oneness, then you don't let yourself be attracted by the temporary variations that seem pleasurable, and repulsed by the pains of heat and cold, too much heat, whatever we have there. Right at the beginning of Gita, he said this is essential. Mata sparshita konteya. He says heat and cold, pleasure and pain, they come and go. One has to tolerate them without being disturbed. And only one who does tolerate is eligible for liberation. The very next verse, right at the beginning of Krishna's instructions, 2nd chapter, text 14 and 15, I believe it is. So how to get to that point? By the process of devotional service and purifying our senses, we can be more and more conscious of Krishna within everything. We can see that the so-called good and the so-called bad is also the play of Krishna's energies, and see him there. And if we are fixed on our duty in Krishna consciousness and remembering Krishna, then we become more and more equipoised. Probably that famous word that was misspelled and therefore mispronounced in the early days of the movement. Equiposed. No one had ever heard that word before. So, oh, it must be posed, equiposed. Equipoised. And that equipoise, especially the mental equilibrium, is a very important aspect of advancing in devotional service. Because we need to be determined in doing our service, even in difficult circumstances. And not let us, that vyavasayatmaka buddhi, that determination to continue service in all circumstances. That develops when you have that strong inner Krishna consciousness and remembrance that in any circumstances you're determined to maintain. And Krishna allows your consciousness to be calm even in great difficulty. And we see great examples of that, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, Prahlad Maharaj, who was attacked. And we were learning about Haridas Thakur. Now, there's two sides to it, of course. There's the allurements that are trying to drag you away from remembering Krishna, and there's also the dangers that will cause you to become frightful and lose your remembrance. So Haridas Thakur was the exemplar for both sides. We're hearing more because of the content of our morning class, this allurement, of Purvachitti and Agnidra, about his amazing tolerance twice of the Ramchandra Khan he sent the prostitute to try to make him fall down because he was getting so famous and getting so much respect. And not only did he pass the test, but he stayed there specifically to deliver her. But on the other side, which we haven't heard for a while, there was a Kazi. I don't know if it's the same Kazi who was eventually blessed by Lord Chaitanya. But anyway, there's the Kazi and the Nawab. The Nawab is the king and the Kazi is the sheriff. And in this case, the Kazi was more demonic. And so Haridas Thakur was becoming famous. Now he had been born as a Muslim and he converted to Hinduism, Vaishnavism. And he was becoming highly respected. Not only by Vaishnava, but even by pious Muslims. So this was a real danger. This was not good. So many Hindus had been converted to Muslim, but they didn't want any Muslim to be converted back to Hindu. So they arrested him. And they said, what are you doing? You know, you're born in this exalted Muslim family, and now you've converted to this low-grade Hindu family, you know. So he answered very calmly. He said, well, there's so many Muslims, so many Hindus have been converted to Islam. What's the big deal if one Muslim converts to Hinduism, you know? So they didn't like that answer. And he threatened him, you have to, there's a certain saying that they declare from the Quran, you know, if you don't repeat this and vow to be a proper Muslim again, then you're in big trouble. So he said, you may cut me up into little pieces, but I'll never stop chanting Hare Krishna. This is a famous. So obviously, they said, okay, take him out in the bazaar, the marketplace, and execute him. This is the way they would execute, by beating. You know, pretty horrible. So they took a couple of big, you know, guys, and they went out there and they started beating him. And he was just chanting. He didn't feel anything, just like Prahlad. He didn't feel anything. Later on, Lord Chaitanya said, I took the blows on my back, and he showed that he had some back. But anyway, he wasn't. So they went 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15, to 22 bazaars, and the guys are getting tired, you know, and beating him, and they were getting panicky because he wasn't dying. And Haridas Thakur could pick up on that, and he said, what's the problem? He said, well, if you don't die, then he's going to execute us. He said, okay, then I'll die. And he went into samadhi. It can look like death. Lord Chaitanya, you know, when he fell in front of Jagannath the first time, he also exhibited that. So they didn't know that, you know, they said, well, okay, now he's dead. So they carried the so-called body back to the Qazi. And they said, what should we do? Should we bury him? I said, no, because if you bury him, then that'll become a place of pilgrimage. We don't want to do that. So you just throw him into the Ganges. I think the big river was there. So they threw him into the Ganges, and revived, swam to the other side, and started chanting. And they had told him, I think the Nawab had told him, if you're able to tolerate all this, then we won't bother you anymore. So, okay. You know, he had powers. So that's both sides. You see, extreme difficulty. He maintained his equilibrium, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And the allurements of, you know, the prostitute in the middle of the night, and Maya Devi herself personified Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna. Couldn't faze him. So that's the, you know, the perfection of that equipoise. So with that, then you can see the super soul. How does he describe it? He sees the different identities. You see that these are just different clothes, different garments that you're wearing. The real essence of the soul is there. The super soul is there, and that enables you to preach to anybody, to not have any kind of prejudice. It says, oh, here's a living being. Here's a human being. Maybe they can take a book. Maybe they can take some prasad. They can hear the holy name. Maybe they'll come to the time. Otherwise, you differentiate, you know, falsely against externals. So that's what's being mentioned here. And what is the result? Sees how beings are expanded. Ever he attains to the Brahman conception. So that's the Brahma Bhuta, when one is always joyful and peaceful, sees the Lord everywhere. Okay, any questions on this particular verse? He's going through one after another, seeing. Every verse has seeing in it. Now the next one he's going to stop. But Prabhupada continues with the seeing.
You had a brief question about a sentence in the purport, and it's about the spirit soul, where it says, after the destruction of the material body, the spirit soul is one. What does that mean? It's right in the middle.
Yeah.
Spirit soul is one.
Yeah, it means one means that we're all equivalent spirit souls. It's not that we merge, you know. No, it doesn't. We never really merge into the Brahman. We can appear to merge, but you don't lose your individuality. That's like the first lesson of the Gita, practically. Natvevaham jatu nasam natam neme janadipa. Nachaiva nabhavishyat sarve vayamatakparam. Krishna speaking to Arjuna, you and all these different soldiers, we've always been individuals in the past, we're individuals now, be individuals in the future. But it means that we have essential qualities, all of us, every living entity, not just human beings, every soul has this essential quality of consciousness and eternity. You know, we never were born, we never die. And we also have a form, a spiritual form that is not evident now, that is covered over. But that's also there. So we're all equivalent in that regard. All of this differentiation by race, by gender, all of that is very temporary, and it's ultimately insignificant. So the great devotees, they see the soul and they try to speak to the soul and connect the soul with Krishna, the Supreme Soul. And in that regard, everybody is a candidate. There's nobody is, you see, but the material vision, colored by the modes of nature, you're looking for someone like you're looking for someone who you can exploit, or you're looking for someone who can give you pleasure, or that person, I know I hate him because, or the brother, like all of that. That's the delusion of duality. The Dvandva Moha, which we have to be cured of. Hare Krishna. All right, should we go on? Any remote questions? All right, we have another local. Hold on, Vijay. We have a local question, then you can have a turn. We have a fellow in Portugal. He listens to all the classes, and he always guys. Go ahead.
So, are even individual souls like full of like eternity, knowledge, and bliss?
What is that?
Like the individual souls, like the jivat.
Yes.
Like, but then, what's the difference between like the super soul and the?
The difference is the difference between the drop of water and the ocean. In other words, the quality is the same, but because we're minute, infinitesimal, we can be covered. Our natural spiritual qualities can be covered over. And that's why we're marginal, tata star shakti. So by our own mistake, we become absorbed in the material energy. And then we're knocked around by the dualities, birth, old age, disease, and death, all these varieties. And that can go on for millions of years. But we never lose that essential nature. It may be covered, but not destroyed. You see? So we have it, but we can't access it until we purify.
So if we uncover our like original consciousness, will we be as blissful, as knowledgeful as the Supreme Soul, or?
Yeah. There's this nice, these sutras are so great, they're small, you can easily remember them. Anandamaya Abhyasat means, Anandamaya means full of bliss. And Abhyasat means by his activities, by his lila, we can see how full of bliss Krishna is. So, we are, don't forget, the 10 elements of knowledge, they're good to refer to sometimes. Beda Beda Prakasham Sakalam Abhihare. This is the famous Achincha Beda Beda Tattva. So Beda Beda Prakasham Sakalam Abhihare. Everything, including ourselves and all, even material energy, is simultaneously one with and different from Krishna. But because we are innately spiritual, we share the spiritual qualities that Krishna has. But they're covered over because we're minute. So here's a syllogism, if you will. And that is that Krishna is an Anandamaya Abhyasa. We know from reading Krishna book, if you know familiar with Leela, he's never morose, or if he seems to be at one point because he's separated from Radharani, that's all part of a larger blissful Leela, right? He's never really morose. And so he's full of, even when he's killing the demons, it's sport for him, right? It's sport when Nrsingadev lets Hiranyakashipu go a little bit, plays with them like a cat plays with a rat, But ultimately, gets down to business, and that's the end of him, So Krishna's enjoying himself in all different varieties of ways, all these different mellows, right? So he's an Anandamaya Abhyasat. He's full of bliss. So what's with us? We're a part and parcel of him. Why aren't we always full of bliss? Because we're covered by this covering of matter, gross and subtle, by which we cannot perceive our own intrinsic nature. That's what's happened. So when we are reinstated, or we reawaken our spiritual nature, and we actually know our eternal form and our relation with Krishna, and we're actually living it, even when we're in the material world, you can live it inside your heart. The great devotees are doing that, Then we'll always be in bhava, in ecstasy. There's this term, sthai bhava. It's kind of, it takes your breath away when you think what it means. Bhava is just, inches away from prema. And so it means full of ecstasy. Bhava is ecstasy. But sthai means steady. doesn't end. I mean, can you imagine? That's why the great acharyas and the great, ascetics like our Goswamis can, they don't have a home. They just live under a tree. They hardly eat, hardly sleep, have hardly any clothes. There's as materially renounced as you can be, but Gopi Bhavara Samritabda Hari Kalola Magno Mahur. Again and again, they're diving into the ocean of bliss of the Gopi Bhava. They're at the highest. So the wealthiest. Rupa Goswami had a whole boatload of gold. He cashed out, had all this gold. He distributed some to his family, to the Brahmins and devotees. And some he kept as a emergency. But that was nothing compared to the wealth that he had when he became Rupa Goswami and actually was existing at this highest level. So we have that nature, but we can't access it now. We've forgotten it. But it's eternally with us, which is very encouraging. It means even at this late date, after all these millions of births, if we do the right thing and we do the process properly, we can also progress toward that goal and hopefully in this birth reach it. If not, a couple of births later. But what's that compared to the millions of births we've already had? Go ahead. Oh, wait. Vijay, be a little patient. One more local one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can wait.
Okay.
So there's we find someone a demigod, someone a human being, a dog, a cat, etc. And in the sentence, the second.
Is it
one,
okay?
Yeah, and my question is: are there demigods residing on this planet, or am I misunderstanding this sentence?
Yeah, you're misunderstanding it.
Okay.
When Prabhupada says in the material conception, like we find someone, it doesn't mean you find them on Garnet Avenue. It just means, it's just a way of speaking. It means that we find in our study of the Shastra that someone is a demigod, someone is a human being, someone's a dog or cat. It's not that we may find them, around the corner. They're on higher planets, unless they choose to appear on this earth. I mean, they may. You may find one. But the idea is that there's a great variety of bodies you can have. Some very high, some very low. 8,400,000. Yeah. Vijay, you're on.
Dravida Prabhu, my
Yes, sir.
humble obeisances, thank you very much for your class. Prabhu, this is a difficult, controversial question, but I will ask it anyway. And this is related to how the Western mentality interprets this verse in order to say no to surrender to Krishna.
Yeah.
The Eastern mentality, the Oriental mentality goes along with this verse, but the Western mentality say no is saying no in what way? For me to ask my question, I need to quote, to present to you the two concepts: sensible man, and he attains to the Brahman conception.
Oh.
Prabhu,
No, I think what you want to emphasize is that he attains.
he attains to the Brahman conception if he becomes a sensible man.
Yes. And ceases to see different data. Okay.
So for us to attain to the Brahman conception, we need to be sensible. We need to become sensible. So Prabhu, in relation to this word sensible, the Western mentality, in order to say no to this verse, in disagreement with what Lord Krishna is chanting to Arjuna through this verse, they go as follows. They say that religion and philosophy are meant for the female gender because they are no better than, they are activities no better than like daydreaming. They are not real, they are not substantial, And who is there to with time for daydreaming? The women, because they stay at home, cooking, taking care of the household and the children, and then they have spare time for the daydreaming activities like philosophizing and going to praying and even writing books about based on religion and based on their faith in religion and philosophy. What is the man, because they have to provide for the family, what is it that the man, what is left for the man, the male gender? They have to work hard to provide for the family, so they have no time for daydreaming activities like religion and philosophy. So, Prabhu, my question is as follows. And these people who say no to this verse, they even dare to say that they go further. They say that if a man, in accordance with this difference between genders and their particular activities, if a man goes for religion and philosophy, then these people immediately say that, oh, this fellow must be going for homosexuality, in the sense that homosexuality is a diseased condition, in the sense of being.
Vijay, I think I get the idea. I think I get the idea.
But if I may say just the following, my question is it that if I become a sensible man in order to attain to the Brahman conception, is it that becoming sensible will conflict with my masculinity?
Will conflict with your what?
Masculinity.
Oh my God. Anyway.
Yes, because these people say that to be religious and philosophical,
there are so many people. Vijay,
he's no better than an homosexual.
I know. There are so many.
And
Vijay, stop. You have to stop. No, you have to stop. Sorry, stop now. I understand what you're saying. It's just there are so many crazy people out there. So many different arguments. Some of them seem very intelligent, and this is all part of Maya's trick to way to keep us from coming to Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada's use of the word sensible man, I'm looking for that even in the Sanskrit. Basically, he's just saying when someone who is intelligent and who is purifying his consciousness through the process of yoga, bhakti yoga, then you come to this point. That this is not an easy vision to have, to see not see different identity due to different material bodies. It has nothing to do with gender, really, and this is just one of the millions of ways in which one can block oneself off from the transcendental truth and the knowledge that's presented in Bhagavad Gita. So there's no way of really answering that question that will be satisfactory to the people who have those kind of crazy ideas, unless one gets the blessing of the Vaishnav, so that he's willing to be open to not just the ideas but also the practices, hearing and chanting the holy name. Then there's 1,000,001 ways that you can reject this philosophy. That I believe what I can see and feel. Well, then that's Savai Pungsang Barodharma. You're not going to understand it, Hokshaja. In other words, he's beyond the range of your material vision. And you can easily point out that modern science, just go back a few hundred years, and the kind of things we take for granted today, that in your pocket you have an instrument where you can talk, you pick it up and you hit it 3 times and you talk to someone halfway around the world. That's total mythology. That's impossible. From a few hundred years ago, the same people, because they don't understand how even the fine elements of material energy works. So Krishna consciousness is a completely transcendental science. Prabhupada, it's a science. If you practice it properly, and if you suspend your disbelief because you realize, whoa, there's 1,000,001 material things that I don't understand, so let me give it a try, then you begin to see the reality of it. And in fact, and it's completely, this whole idea of focusing on a sensible man. Well, I mean, that's new to me, frankly, that only the women have time for, thinking about religion, and they can think of all these things. It's just silly. This is the man-woman thing is also just another coat. It's just the body. It's just the body is just another first lesson of Krishna, that you give up the old body just like you give up the old coat and the old dress, and you put on a new one. Next one will be male, female, human, subhuman, superhuman. It's Maya's trick that you completely identify with whatever body you're in, and then you live in that mentality. The whole endeavor in Krishna consciousness is to transcend that limitation and identify yourself as a soul, pure consciousness, and to learn how to live on that platform. Anyway, I'm going to go on. I'm going to read one more. Sorry, Vijay. I know that wasn't one of my wonderful answers that you expected.
Dravida Prabhu, if I may, I asked this question because the owner of the house that we rent for establishing our Hare Krishna temple here, he says that his religion is football.
Well,
that's why I asked this question.
Just pay the rent on time, and he'll be happy. That's the level that he's going to.
Yes, of course.
All right.
Doing that.
Text 32. Anadit van yugunat bhat panamatma himamvyayaha sharirastopi kaunteya nakaroti nalipyate. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. Purport: a living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Thus, he cannot be destroyed. By nature, he is full of bliss. Here's the Anandamaya Abhyasa. By nature, he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him. Now, this may be a little puzzling because we always talk about how the soul is so entangled in all these modes. So, the idea is that it's all like a mental construct. We're identifying with the body. Therefore, when the body gets some damage, we say, "Oh, I'm hurt," and you're meditating on the pain, Or conversely, "Oh, I'm feeling some pleasure now because the pleasure centers in the brain are being stimulated," But the soul himself is never changed by these things. There's this phrase, one of these famous phrases from the Upanishads, "Asango hyayam purushaha," which means that the Purusha, the living entity, is asanga, is never actually affected by the presence in the body. But we think we are. The whole thing is that it's a grand illusion. Prabhupada wrote a letter once. There was this question about the fall of the jiva, which still in some quarters is a controversy. How did we fall from the spiritual world? If Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, when you go there, you don't come back. So it was puzzling. So there's all these puzzles. So one devotee asked him, "Can you write some definitive thing or dictate something that will answer the question, for everybody?" So he wrote what is called the Crow and Towel letter. Why the Crow and Towel? Because ultimately he says it doesn't matter how you got here. You should just do what you needed to get back home, back to Godhead. But he's describing there, and one of the sentences in the letter is that formerly we were with Krishna in his lila or sport. Very important concept. So what happened? Somehow or other, because we have minute independence, we turned away from Krishna. We decided to try to, go on our own and enjoy. And so, therefore, we're given this idea if someone in the temple here decides, I don't want to get up for Mangalarti, I'm going to get up, stay out late and come in, independent. Well, that would be a big disturbance, wouldn't it? You can't stay in the ashram, right? You go out. So this little model Vaikuntha here. So you'll be a disturbance to the others, therefore you're given your own place in the whole material world. Try to enjoy. So that's what we've been given. But Krishna never abandons us. He's always with us with the Super Soul. We've been reading now for verse after verse. So we're wayward children, We've like that famous verse from Lord Chaitanya. Ay nandatanu jikinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam bodo kripayata papada pangajas titaduli sadasham vachintaya. Your servant for eternity, I lost my true identity and fell into this horrid sea of birth and death, O Lord. O Nanda's son, please hear my plea. By your sweet grace, consider me a speck of dust upon your lotus feet forevermore. In other words, please reinstate me in my natural place at your lotus feet in service. I've been wandering so long, I want to go back now. This is a perfect prayer. So that's the nature of the soul. So we are by nature full of bliss, but we don't know it. We can't access it in our present state. It's blocked to us. So Krishna consciousness begins to allow us to access that store of unlimited happiness, which is really lies at the lotus feet of Krishna in service. Being fully Krishna conscious and humbly serving the spiritual master and devotees, and remembering Krishna, and requiring more and more taste for hearing and chanting. You should all read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Don't postpone it. You should try to find it sometime to read it. It's just, that's really the heart and soul of this movement. That is what it's all about. This idea that Lord Chaitanya is so merciful. I'm just reading one section where he's going to Vrindavan the first time. I don't know if he ever makes it. I don't know if he ever makes it Vrindavan this time. But he comes to a border where there's a Muslim kingdom on the other side. And he said, well, you have to be careful. This guy's a drunkard, this leader here. But he hears about Lord Chaitanya. He really wants to meet him. And he finally does. And he becomes completely sold out. He becomes a devotee, and he's crying, and this is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And of course, directly, when Lord Chaitanya was on the planet, just by seeing him at a distance, this Muslim king was completely converted. I mean, that's Namo Mahabodhanyaya. I mean, it's the most munificent incarnation, giving out freely the greatest treasure of love of God. So that's what this movement is a manifestation of. It's giving us a chance to experience that. Even, it's Kali Yuga, and we're so unqualified, but if we just have some sincerity, and we chant from the bottom of our heart, that very powerful process can purify us, and Jagai Madai are the witnesses, they're the evidence. So we should take advantage of it. It's a very rare, opportunity. And all of this stuff will become clear to us. And I guess we ran out of time. But we'll continue tomorrow with text 32, right? No, I read that. I just read that. 33. Yeah, I'm sorry. So nice to see Nandini Radhika and Sachi Dulal. Thank you. You have some engagement down here with your colleagues, yeah. A lot of people come through and they say, oh, old friends. Usually they're looking for some cheap dental work down in Tijuana, but I don't think you're here for that. Hare Krishna. So tomorrow? Oh, not morning? Oh, so how about Mangalarti? No? It's a little hard. Oh, okay. Anyway, it's nice to see you both again. All the glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Very nice class.
Dhanavari. Hari Bol.
Very well.